All right. So just to start off with, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is John Jarrel, and I'm running for County Commissioner District 5. I work currently for Pikes Peak Library District as a senior associate. I work in the Creative Services Department, which is like music recording, etching with lasers, kind of our high-tech equipment stuff that we have at the library. I've been involved in the local political scene in Colorado Springs since about 2015, when I first got involved in the kind of work where you're actually knocking on doors and looking at precincts and caring about that kind of stuff. And I've been involved in county politics, I would say, pretty directly since 2017, when I helped to lead the effort against what we considered to be a gerrymandering effort by the county government. Then, yeah, I'm not sure what else you'd like to know.
That's pretty good. While we're on the topic of the library board, it's been shook up quite a bit lately. What's your take on the current changes to the library board of directors and your loss of your executive?
So there's obviously, there's a lot to be concerned about there. I do want to be a little bit careful while talking about the library. I don't want to bring that too much into my campaign, because they're going to be running a parallel campaign potentially. So it's just not, but yeah, it is definitely, it's something to follow closely. And of course, the Board of County Commissioners plays a large role in deciding who gets on that board. And, it looks like, I'll say this, it looks like a lot of the momentum from the school board races has carried over and started to politicize a library board, which has historically not been a political body.
Okay. You've been like you mentioned, you've been active with the El Paso Democratic Party for a while now. Why is this the time and the position to seek higher office and to actually run yourself?
Why am I going to run? Well, right now is the time because the board has a lot of oversight over some of the issues that people find most important, and they don't even realize that the county board plays such a central role in it. So like right now, the number one issue, I think, facing Colorado Springs and El Paso County that we can start to deal with immediately at the local level, and have to some extent, but is affordable housing crisis, which of course the county calls attainable housing. I want to be clear, like I know their terminology. I'm not caught off guard by that. But yeah, the county, we need to start taking steps right now. Really, we should have been taking these steps earlier, although only since, and a lot of people that I talk to, because we bring up the affordable housing, right? Other issues, all the development issues, water, the annexation deals between the county and the city, all really important stuff. But as far as affordable housing, a lot of people bring up, well, the Telluride decision, local governments have no control over these kinds of things. If you're familiar with that, the Supreme Court decision of Colorado that says that requiring like density of units and things like that was considered rent control. Well, the legislator just changed those rules last year. And so now is the time for us to start taking steps. We finally have the power at these local municipal and county levels. It's finally time for us to start taking these steps to ensure that as the county develops, because the county ultimately is the city plan in many ways for the city, because they are the ones that permit for developments that are on the border with the city, which ultimately are the whole plan for the county, of course, is for the city to annex these developments because they can't afford to pay for the infrastructure, as the county master plan itself says. So with all that in mind, we need to make sure that now that we have more tools in our pocket here locally, that we start using them right away to start taking steps to ensure that we are developing in a way that benefits not just the developers, but the people that live in the city, people that are looking for affordable rent, people that are looking for their starter homes. And yeah, I mean, obviously, Almost every person in the county is affected some way by the cost of housing.
Yeah, my next question actually on the list was to ask specifically about what your approach is to growth and development. Is there anything more there that you want to elaborate on as to
Yeah, I'm
how,
sure. Right, because there's a lot more, I mean, there's more than just affordable housing, right? So obviously, one of the most important things when you're looking at development is going to be density. And we're always the developers are always gonna be building their $1.2 million houses and lots and things like that. Obviously, we want them to be doing that. That's what brings them the profits. That's what spurs the growth in the county, to be sure. But we've got to make sure that we're considering things like how are we going to get public transportation to some of these developments that are on the border with the city? Are we making sure that we're developing in a way that's considering the long-term impacts on water, right? Because I know that's an issue developers don't like to hear about. A lot of people like to ignore it and pretend like it's not a problem, because we need to get the affordable housing, but you've got to make sure you're taking steps as far as landscaping and the internal structures in the houses and density again, to make sure that we're not heading towards a disaster in 10 or 15 years as these droughts become worse and worse. So ultimately, it's planning. My approach to planning is to make sure that we are, if the idea is for Colorado Springs to annex these developments anyway, then we should be taking steps from the start, not retrofitting later, not starting these long negotiations with the city later, but to make sure that we're taking the steps now so that we're thinking about what is this going to look like? What are these developments going to look like in 10, 15 years?
How would you, you touched on it a little bit there, but how in general would you characterize the county-city relationship with Colorado Springs? And what, if anything, would you like to see changed about it?
I think that there is, so we are in a weird situation in Colorado Springs and El Paso County, in that we have one of the largest cities in the United States, right? But the city is largely at the mercy of county policy because we have so much space in the county. And so our county government, so a lot of other cities don't have to deal with this. Like, so if you look at what happened with Banning Lewis Ranch, I think that kind of defines the relationship between the county and the city, because the city had a bold vision for the Banning Lewis Ranch annex, which the rules were just changed for that a few years ago. So we got that in the 1980s, where a lot of these things I'm talking about, right? And maybe they took it too far, like, to be sure, but talking about making sure that we had density in housing and sidewalks built and made sure that we had good water policy and make sure that we're building the city for not just now, but to think about 10, 20, 30 years in the future. Well, what happened is the developers just said, okay, we're not going to deal with you then. We're going to jump past Banning Lewis Ranch. We're going to develop out, we're going to build Falcon, and we're going to build these other developments. And, those are part of our community. It's great that they're here now, but we need to make sure that moving forward, that some of because ultimately, again, the plan is for the city to annex these developments. So we need to make sure that that we have a closer relationship between the city and the county than we do. And I know there was some gains made there just last year, or a couple of years ago. They reached a new agreement about the annexation plan moving forward. But ultimately, I feel that it's a little one-sided here, considering the what the recourse that the city has if the county is permitting these developments that don't benefit the community as a whole in the long run. There's not really a lot that the city can do without there being some people inside the county government who agree that we should be taking this long-term approach to development.
You are, if elected, you would be the proverbial blueberry in the tomato soup of El Paso elected officials. How would you operate in that setting, kind of being the only Democrat on?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So, and it underscores another point, which I'd like to, listen, the elephant in the room, right? which is that these 5 county commissioner seats have been held by the Republican Party for the entirety of their existence since we created the 5 back in the 1970s. So there's no doubt that when I come in, I'm not going to be able to throw my weight around and dictate county policy, right? And that means that you have to do what? You have to work with the county commissioners that you're on the board with. So that means that any like idea of taking a firebrand approach to this that's not my style to begin with, but it's obviously not going to work in El Paso County regardless. But what you can do is you can start to take steps, right? So coming back to affordable housing, there's going to be people on the board, probably everybody else on the board, who disagrees with this particular like urban development centered approach to development. But we all agree that there is an affordable housing crisis. So you work from there. And so you take those first steps to make sure that the county has gained approval from the state, because that new law that I'm talking about, the county actually has to take steps to even be allowed to begin to approach developers with menus of options of like, these are the things that you can, if we're going to give you these permits, you have to select from amongst this menu of options to help promote affordable housing in El Paso County. To even get to that point, you have to get approval from the state government, from the organization's called something like the Organization of Local Governments. It's right in the bill. It says, here's 10 options. Your county has to prove, or your municipality, in this case, the county has to prove you've taken one of these steps to even be allowed to then take those next steps. And I feel like we can get there, right? So between all the different kind of incentive programs and different options that are available according to this plan, according to this bill, I would have to come in and work with the other commissioners to find agreement on at least one of these points before we even approach the developers, with the idea that that would be a longer term goal that ultimately the voters would decide if it was a worthy goal or not. But we need to take those first steps anyway. I think we can find some common
Good.
I was told not to get into the weeds. Someone told me, they're like, John, when you're in this interview, don't get into the weeds. Make value statements, John. And
it's a balancing act, though. You don't want to just put out pablum and.
Well, the weeds are where the stuff actually gets done, but the value statements are what gets votes.
In general, how would you describe your leadership style?
My leadership style is, direct, and ultimately you got to realize that in situations like this, while I would obviously have to take a leading role on getting the things that I want to get done, and I have to be direct and firm about that. Ultimately, we're a team. So, the leadership style, anytime you're in a body that's a legislator or something similar to being a legislator as a county board, you've got to find that common ground. You've got to work with other people at the same time. So you don't want to give up your ground too easily, but at the same time, so you want to be firm, but at the same time, you've got to be friendly. You've got to approach this in a way where you recognize the only way things are going to get done is ultimately if we work as a team.
Just scrolling down the question list here. So COVID is not going away anytime soon. How would you like to see the county's public health board treat the issue going forward?
Yeah, so there was that controversy recently, right? Where obviously the county as a body is not going to require mask mandates or anything like that. So that's just out of the question. It's not even worth considering, because it's not a possibility right now. But even just making statements, if you recall, about the need for members of the county to take steps to help prevent the spread of the virus, that was backed by members of the professional side, right? Within the health department, that became politicized, and it became this dramatic event. And I was disappointed by that. So, I mean, you could have disagreements with people about a lot of things, but just even making statements to the public, non-binding statements saying like, hey, we need, please do your research, find out what there is to know about vaccines, fine, but don't fall into this, this world of conspiracy theories, and take that personal responsibility, right? So whenever we're talking about, and from the position of the Board of County Commissioners, like what we can do to support the health board, we need to make sure that because they've clearly decided there's going to be no steps that the board is going to take to help fight the pandemic, but at least don't politicize it to the point where you feel like you can gain political points by opposing even statements to the public that are educational and hoping to inform them about steps that they can take to help prevent the spread of the virus.
What would you say is the biggest issue facing the county currently, and how would you approach it? And if this
I mean, I've clearly talked about this a lot. So yeah, I mean, I would say that, well, the biggest issue is going to be affordable housing. The reason I would say that's the biggest issue is you could maybe look at some other problems that we face, because that's one that we have tools to address. So it's that balancing act, right? It's the fact that it's such a huge issue, and there's such a large collection of steps that we could take that we're not currently taking. But there's other issues facing the county right now. In fact, I think a lot of people would probably say, well, right now, shouldn't we be worried about the fires, right? How dry it is, and the fact that we've already had evacuation orders, and we're not even in the summer yet. But these are all obviously related issues, because if we run out of water, like if we just ignore this, right? If we just say, okay, you know what, we'll deal with this a decade from now, and we wait till we're actually running out of water, when we start having to implement water controls because we didn't take steps now, then the fire issue becomes that much more severe. And obviously these are all related, right? So it's ultimately, the focus needs to be on sustainable, affordable development.
What is one unpopular decision you've made that you still stand by today? And then what is it? Why is that?
An unpopular decision that I've made. Well, in my workplace, after we lifted the mask mandate at the library, I decided ultimately what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the data, right? And what's funny about that is that you end up with people on both sides of the argument disagreeing with you, right? So whenever, because and I would like to think that by making the decisions that we all make, including myself, that we can help promote other people to follow maybe a similar path. So when our mask mandate was lifted, I'm still wearing my mask. The cases were still incredibly high, and so you get into debates with different coworkers who are like, well, why are you still doing this? Like, look, the world's changing positions, and you just pull up a graph and you show them the cases per 100,000 was the 7-day rolling average, and like, look, this is still at 250 or whatever it is, and you tell them, this is what I'm going to do. Whenever those cases get below 100 or 50, or you choose, like, this is how you should approach these things, right? Then I'm going to stop wearing my mask. And then I did, right? So eventually we've hit these thresholds that I said, this is my threshold. And now a lot of people who thought like, well, John, you were, on our side on this issue. Now it seems like you're on the other side on this issue. And it's like, no, the issue needs to be data driven. And we can debate about that point, right? Like, where is that? Are we getting guidance from the government exactly when we shouldn't be wearing masks? Maybe not as much as we would have liked. So in the end, whenever you follow the data, you're going to end up having some clashes with people that you agree with on the issue, because sometimes the data doesn't support the view.
One question that we're asking to sheriff's candidates as well is looking at the county jail. We're seeing, I think it's, what is it, Brian, 11 deaths in the last year and a half,
11
something like that.
since 2020, I think, January 2020.
Yeah, so we're asking county commissioner candidates too. So what do you see going on there, and what would you do to maybe change that situation?
So I gotta say, this is not something that I've looked into enough to have an informed, like, I'm not gonna have a great answer for you right now. So you were talking about COVID deaths?
Well, no, they're not all. COVID has maybe dealt worsened the situation, but I believe the majority of them are drug related or suicide.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
about a third of them are suicides, and a good chunk of them are health related. We'll say health related. So and some are clearly not drug related, but the jury's out probably on some of the other.
okay, well, there's just right off the top here, there's been some steps now taken by the state government to try to address some of these problems and provide mental health to support to people that with the fentanyl bill. But ultimately, when you have problems like this, you're going to need to address them. You're going to need to have the expertise involved in addressing them, which of course means that it might end up costing the county a little bit more money, which is interesting because, anytime we face any of these problems, right, and within the county, it's really tough, even during emergency times of emergency, to enact new policies at the county level or anywhere in Colorado because of Tabor. And then to make things even worse for the county, you end up in situations where I think that the county has done a little bit too much bragging about the taxes that it's saving all of its citizens, which is, it's great, that we're able to, run a local government without taxing our residents as much as other counties in the state, except we're not. Like that's the other part of that that formula there that the county commissioners are often very deceptive about, which is that we don't have the money to implement even the programs we've already committed ourselves to. Like that's the situation that we're in. We need it to keep that excess Tabor revenue that we voted down last year, and we absolutely need it. Like the county was desperate for these funds. Like even if we got them, we would not have enough money to spend on the programs that we've already committed to. So one of the things that just blows my mind when we're talking about the county jail and sheriff's department and things like that, they had to cut funds that were going to be allocated to the sheriff's department, if you're aware of that, after we voted down the money. And so, the county board defunded the police. I mean, it's just, and this is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about defunding the police. There's only a finite amount of resources, and how do you decide to move them around? So I think, when we're talking about any of these programs that we need, including here, if we were needing to address this, we need to at least be honest with the residents about the financial state of the county, because I think had the board had a history of being upfront and honest about that situation, then their endorsement, because the board endorsed the keeping the money. This wasn't something that they asked the residents to vote against. It's something that the board members voted or they endorsed this measure. And so, but people are under this impression that somehow our county is able to magically address all of its problems without costing anyone anything. And I think that it puts us in a situation where it makes it really difficult to address a lot of these concerns, like the one you're talking about.
Okay, great. Brian, do you have any additional questions?
I don't think so. I think John covered everything.
All right, wonderful. You want to give the spiel about when these will be available?
I'll spiel. Yeah. So we'll have our videos up on our website probably within the next 2 weeks or so, and then we'll have the endorsement issue coming out in the Indy in mid-June. We're looking at around the 15th, so you can be on the lookout for that. All
Sounds
right.
good.
Anything you wanted to say, John, to wrap up?
Sure. When I was talking about myself, I forgot to mention, I have a master's degree. I went to school. I have a undergraduate degree in history and economics and a master's degree studying the American politics of the 1960s. So I think that that's, all that's obviously relevant to my political work.
Okay. We appreciate your time. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right.
Thank
Take
you.
care.